This constant morning anxiety isn't because you lack discipline or willpower.
Most people try to win the entire day before it even starts. You are biologically setting your mental baseline for the entire day to panic and distraction. You must set a baseline for yourself before the outside world is allowed to intervene.
I want to start by asking you a question, and I want you to be really honest with yourself right now. Do your mornings constantly feel rushed or anxious or just, I don't know, slightly off?
Like you're already behind the second your feet hit the floor.
Exactly. If you are nodding right now, the paradigm shift we're unpacking in this episode is, well, it's massive. Because this constant morning anxiety isn't because you lack discipline or willpower. It's actually because you are starting your day reacting rather than deciding.
And that is such a crucial distinction in the behavioral research we're looking at. Most people don't actually start their own day. They wake up and they immediately enter someone else's day,
Right, and they do it before they've had a single independent thought.
which is wild when you actually think about it.
It is. And that's exactly what our mission is for this episode. We are having a conversation about realistic morning rituals for a calm and productive day. And to be clear from the jump, we are not advocating for some, impossible, perfectly aesthetic routine here.
No, not at all. We're exploring a practical framework designed specifically for the days when you are tired, busy, or honestly just not in the mood.
Because realistically, those days, the exhausted, overwhelming ones, those are the exact moments your routine actually needs to function.
Precisely. If it only works when you're well rested, it's not much of a routine.
Right. Welcome to the Living Better podcast. Living longer is a science, but living better is a choice.
We are just so genuinely grateful that you chose to spend your time with us today.
We really are. Before we jump in, if you're someone who values realistic self-care, definitely consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel.
Yeah, it really helps us keep bringing these conversations to you.
I was looking through the notes on this concept of reacting versus deciding, and the most striking visual came to mind. Think about checking your phone the absolute second you wake up, which, let's be honest, most of us do.
Oh, totally. It's almost an involuntary reflex at this point.
It is. But doing that is literally like letting 100 strangers into your bedroom to shout their demands at you before you've even had a glass of water. Just imagine that physically happening in your room.
That sounds absolutely terrifying.
Right. You open your eyes, and suddenly a coworker is demanding a report. 3 people are arguing about politics in the corner. A brand is yelling at you to buy a sweater, and someone else is just flashing photos of their tropical vacation in your face. It's just absolute sensory and emotional chaos.
It is chaos, and the behavioral psychology research we're reviewing today asks a really fascinating question about that. Why do we tolerate that digital chaos when we would never, ever accept the physical equivalent?
Never. We call the police.
Exactly. And this brings us right to the core problem with how modern culture approaches mornings. The internet's obsession with the perfect morning routine is actually fundamentally flawed. According to the data, it's setting most people up for failure.
You mean those like 2-hour routines with the gratitude journaling, the ice baths, the meditation, and the perfectly frosted matcha lattes?
Yes, exactly those. The literature points out that those hyper-optimized routines are built entirely for the best-case scenario.
Right, the days where the stars align.
Yeah, they're designed for days when you are fully rested, bursting with motivation, and have absolutely zero unpredictable stress in your life, which for most of us is almost never.
So they're incredibly fragile.
Highly fragile. But when we look at the neurobiology of waking up, we start to realize how high the stakes actually are. In the first 10 to 20 minutes of waking up, your brain is highly impressionable. It just hasn't stabilized into its waking state yet.
Okay, let's dig into that instability a bit more because this was a huge aha moment for me in the reading. What is physically happening in the brain during those first few minutes?
So it really comes down to brainwave states and neurochemistry. When you are asleep, your brain operates in these slow delta and theta waves. As you wake up, you naturally transition into alpha waves.
And alpha is a pretty relaxed state, right?
Right. It's relaxed, but it's also highly suggestible. You pass through this alpha state before finally shifting into the fast-paced beta waves of alert, focused consciousness. So when you first wake up, your neurochemistry is essentially a blank slate.
Wow.
You also experience something called the cortisol awakening response. It's a natural, completely healthy spike in cortisol designed to just get you out of bed.
But, and I think I see where this is going, if you immediately grab your phone and enter consumption mode,
Yeah.
you are totally hijacking that natural process.
Completely. If you look at an alarming email or, jump into the rapid fire dopamine of social media while you're still in that suggestible alpha state, you are taking that natural cortisol spike and compounding it with threat-based adrenaline.
Oh, wow. So you're basically weaponizing your own wake-up hormones.
Yes, you trigger a rush of cheap, quick dopamine, you instantly scatter your attention, and you create this false sense of regency. You are biologically setting your mental baseline for the entire day to panic and distraction.
Okay, let me pause you there, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because the high achiever part of my brain is throwing up red flags right now. And I know someone listening is having the exact same thought.
Sure, lay it on me.
Isn't checking emails immediately just, I don't know, a necessary evil of being responsible? Like,
Yeah.
if I have a demanding job or a team that relies on me, isn't ignoring the outside world first thing in the morning actually just procrastination disguised as wellness?
That is such a common pushback, and the research actually specifically addresses this trap that high achievers fall into. The literature argues that this mindset is fundamentally backward.
Really? Backward how?
Well, protecting your neurochemical baseline is the absolute foundation of true productivity. It is not a delay tactic. When you check that email before your eyes are even fully adjusted to the light, you aren't being proactive. You are being exclusively reactive.
Because I'm just responding to what someone else decided was important.
Exactly. You're letting someone else's external urgency dictate your internal emotional state.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because if you read an email about, say, a missing file at 6:00 a.m., you can't even do anything about it yet. But your body reacts as if you need to solve it in that exact second.
Precisely. Your cognitive load maxes out before you've even brushed your teeth. If you want to be truly responsible and effective at your job, you need to show up with a focused, grounded, beta wave mind.
And you just cannot do that if you've surrendered your attention and spiked your stress hormones before you've even taken a single deep breath.
Exactly. You're running on fumes from minute one.
That reframing is so powerful.
Ugh.
Okay, so if these fragile, perfect routines collapse under pressure, like on a random, exhausted Tuesday when the alarm doesn't go off, we need a system that actually holds up under real-world pressure.
Right. And the sources we reviewed all converge on one central guiding principle to build that resilience. Calm mornings don't come from doing more things. They don't come from adding 10 meticulous steps to your waking hours.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. They actually come from reducing early decision chaos. The psychological literature calls this principle control before input.
Control before input.
Yes. You must set a baseline for yourself before the outside world is allowed to intervene.
It's about engineering just a tiny bit of psychological space. And the materials outline 4 specific anchors to build that space, right?
Yeah.
Not as rigid steps to memorize, but as flexible anchors to hold you steady.
Exactly. Anchors you can use on your worst days.
And the first one directly addresses the nightmare of those 100 strangers shouting in your bedroom. It's simply about keeping the door locked and delaying the world.
Yes. Now, the neurological reality is that your brain actively seeks stimulation the second you wake up. It craves that dopamine hit from the screen because it's a really easy way to kickstart the nervous system.
So it's not a moral failing that we want to grab the phone. It's biology.
It is pure biology. So the researchers aren't suggesting you aim for 30 minutes of monk-like isolation. That's just setting yourself up for failure on a busy day. The framework suggests aiming for just 3 minutes.
Just 3 minutes.
That's it. Sit up, breathe, drink a glass of water, look out the window. Just 3 minutes.
You know, when I was reading this, it instantly reminded me of an airlock on a spaceship.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Well, think about the mechanics of it. An astronaut doesn't just, fling open the door of the ship and step directly out into the chaotic, freezing void of space. That would be catastrophic. The pressure difference would destroy them.
Right, they'd be pulled right out.
Exactly. They step into an airlock first. The inner doors seal. It's quiet. They take a moment to equalize the pressure. They check their oxygen. They get their bearings. And only then do they open the outer door to step into the void. Those 3 minutes without your phone, that is your cognitive airlock.
That is a brilliant analogy, and it perfectly maps onto the neuroscience. You absolutely need that brief, protected transition zone to pressurize your own mind before stepping out into the chaotic void of the day's demands.
It just gives you a second to remember who you are before everyone else tells you who they need you to be.
Beautifully put. Those 3 minutes allow the brain's default mode network to come online naturally. It shifts you from being a victim of external circumstance to being the author of your own morning.
Okay, so the airlock is secure. My mind is shielded from the internet for 3 minutes. But practically speaking, my physical body is still exhausted, rigid with sleep inertia, and probably just wants to crawl back under the covers.
Naturally, yeah.
So, how does the framework suggest we bridge the gap between being semi conscious and actually getting out of bed?
This is where we move into the second anchor, signaling safety to your body. Now, signaling safety can sound a bit clinical, but the biological mechanism behind it is fascinating. We're talking about engaging the somatic feedback loops in your body.
Specifically involving the vagus nerve, right? And to be clear, we are not talking about jumping into a high intensity interval workout here.
Not at all. It means doing something as small as stretching your arms, rolling your shoulders a few times, or simply standing up and feeling the floor under your feet. The science of the mind-body connection shows that your brain is constantly reading your physical posture to determine your emotional state.
So, when you wake up late, your body is stiff, your shoulders are crunched up, and you are physically rushing.
And your nervous system interprets that physical tension and rapid movement as a literal physical threat.
Like your brain thinks, wait, why are our muscles so tense and why are we moving so frantically? There must be a predator chasing us.
Yeah.
So it just starts pumping out adrenaline.
Exactly. You activate the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, but by taking just 30 seconds to deliberately stretch, take a slow breath, or roll your shoulders, you stimulate the vagus nerve.
Which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode.
Yes, you are sending a biological bottom-up signal to your brain saying, we're okay, we are safe, there is no emergency here, we can start the day calmly.
It's just incredible how profound a 30-second stretch can be when you understand the mechanics behind it. You're not forcing yourself to magically become an enthusiastic morning person. You're just systematically turning off your body's alarm bells.
Exactly, you're just lowering the volume.
Which brings us to a really interesting pivot in the research. Our body now feels physically safe. But for a lot of people, the mind is still humming with this sense of dread.
And this third anchor is arguably the most vital yet least discussed piece of the puzzle. The psychological studies highlight that the overwhelming dread you feel in the morning is rarely just random free-floating anxiety.
No, what is it usually?
It is almost always the hum of unfinished thoughts.
Oh, like things we are actively avoiding, or emails we forgot to send, or conflicts we are overthinking.
Yes. There is a psychological principle called the Zeigarnik effect, which states that people remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks significantly better than completed tasks.
So they just stay active in the brain.
Exactly. These unfinished items create cognitive tension. They act like a background application just quietly draining your phone's battery. So the strategy here is to identify that tension. You simply ask yourself, what's already in my head right now?
And then you externalize it.
Right. You write it down on a piece of paper or even just say it out loud.
Okay, I have to be completely vulnerable here and challenge this because my instinct is to run in the exact opposite direction.
Let's hear it.
If I wake up in a peaceful airlock And the very first thing I do is actively acknowledge the massive, terrifying project I'm behind on. Won't that immediately spike my anxiety? I mean, doesn't focusing on the scary thing entirely defeat the purpose of a calm morning?
It sounds totally counterintuitive, I know. But the neurobiology of anxiety explains why this actually works. The intense fear doesn't actually come from the task itself, it comes from the avoidance of the task.
The avoidance is the scary part.
Yes. When an unfinished thought is just floating around in your subconscious, it is processed by the amygdala, which is the brain's fear center. It feels like an abstract, terrifying monster in the dark.
It feels huge and insurmountable because it has no boundaries, just this vague threat.
Exactly. But the moment you identify it, the moment you physically write down, I am stressed about finishing the Q3 budget report, you force that information to move from the emotional amygdala into the prefrontal cortex.
And that's the logical planning center of the brain.
Right. You turn the monster into a concrete data point. You aren't necessarily doing the terrifying project right then, you are just closing the open loop in your working memory. As the researchers emphasize, clarity reduces pressure far faster than trying to muster up fake motivation.
Clarity reduces pressure. That is a brilliant distillation.
Yeah.
You're essentially telling your brain, look, I see the threat. It is contained right here on this piece of paper. We don't need to keep sounding the alarm.
Exactly. It completely reorganizes your cognitive load.
So, following the sequence, we've secured the 3-minute airlock to delay external demands. We've signaled safety to our nervous system through movement. We've moved our anxiety from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex by closing mental loops.
Right. You set the stage.
Now we are finally ready to look at our actual schedule for the day.
Huh.
And according to the sources, this is where ambitious people usually trip up and ruin all that good groundwork.
They absolutely do. Which brings us to the fourth and final anchor the data suggests. Choose less than you want.
Choose less than you want. I mean, that almost feels offensive to modern productivity culture.
It directly challenges it. Most people try to win the entire day before it even starts. They sit down with their coffee, they open their laptops, and they write out these sprawling to-do lists with 15 different high-stakes items.
Yeah, they set impossibly high expectations based on an idealized version of their energy levels, like, today I will conquer the world.
And then inevitably, 10 Civ AM rolls around, a meeting runs late, an emergency pops up, and you've only crossed off half of one item.
And the guilt sets in. You feel like you're already failing, which triggers decision fatigue before lunch.
Precisely. So the psychological rule of thumb here is pick one main thing. Identify the single most important task that will actually move the needle today. Maybe two, if you are feeling genuinely fantastic. But direction beats volume every single time.
Reading through the studies on decision fatigue, the way we create these massive morning to-do lists is exactly like packing a 50-pound suitcase for a one-night trip.
Oh, that's a great visual.
Logically, you are only going to be gone for 24 hours, but your anxiety takes over and whispers, well, what if I need 4 pairs of shoes? What if there's a formal event? What if it suddenly snows in July? I better pack the heavy winter coat just in case.
That's a fantastic way to visualize cognitive overload.
Right, you're just dragging around all this unnecessary heavy weight out of pure anxiety. And the worst part is, lugging that heavy suitcase to the airport wears you out before you even reach your destination.
Wow.
That's exactly what a giant morning to-do list does to your brain. You exhaust your working memory and your executive function on tasks you aren't even going to touch until Thursday.
You are bankrupting your daily cognitive budget on hypothetical scenarios. And, this observation leads to a really crucial reality check found in the literature. It's a massive pattern interrupt for how we view our habits.
That's the reality check.
The authors point out that if your routine only works when everything goes perfectly right, when you slept 8 hours, when the house is quiet, when your inbox is magically manageable, it is not actually a routine, it's a performance.
Wow. Let that sink in. If it only works in ideal conditions, it's a performance.
And maintaining a performance is deeply, deeply exhausting. Genuine, sustainable routines have to be resilient. They have to function in the messiness of actual unpredictable life.
Okay, let's actually test that resilience then. Let's take the entire framework we've just unpacked and apply it to a real messy scenario. Let's see how these mechanisms hold up on a random Tuesday where literally everything goes wrong.
I love it. Walk us through the scenario.
Okay, picture this. You wake up and you are just bone tired.
Yeah.
You tossed and turned all night. The alarm didn't sound like a gentle acoustic guitar, it felt aggressive and jarring.
Yeah.
You are already in a terrible mood and you are running 15 minutes late.
Okay, so if we look at the default behavioral pattern for that morning, you wake up tired and you instantly grab your phone to check the time. But there's a notification. It's an urgent email from your boss, a text you forgot to reply to yesterday, and maybe a social media post of someone who is somehow already finishing a marathon.
This the worst.
Right. You instantly feel behind, your amygdala fires up, you scramble out of bed, your physical body is tense, which is signaling danger to your vagus nerve. You're rushing, and you spend the rest of the day in a state of low-grade panic, constantly trying to catch up to a baseline you never even set.
It's an awful feeling, and it dictates the entire posture of your day. But let's apply the research-backed system to the exact same terrible morning. You wake up exhausted, the alarm is jarring, but this
This time, you don't reach for the phone. You implement the airlock. 3 minutes, no external input. You just sit up, look at the wall, and let your brain transition from alpha to beta waves on its own terms.
then you signal safety. You drink some water. You stand up, and instead of sprinting to the bathroom, you deliberately roll your shoulders and take one deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
You utilize the vagus nerve to tell your nervous system, we are tired, yes, but we are not being chased by a predator. We are safe.
Then you tackle the Zeigarnik effect. You ask yourself, why is my chest tight? What's humming in the background? You realize you are dreading a difficult conversation you have to have at noon.
So you acknowledge it.
Exactly. You say, okay, that conversation is what's making me anxious. You write it down. You move the fear from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, actively closing the loop.
And finally, you evaluate your day. You look at your master list and say, nope, I'm exhausted today. I cannot carry the 50-pound suitcase. What is the one thing I absolutely need to do to keep my life moving forward today? And you pick that one single task.
When you lay it out like that side by side, look at the staggering difference in the neurochemical outcome. The external circumstances of the morning did not change.
Not at all.
You are still tired, you are still running late, but the trajectory of your nervous system is entirely different. The literature is incredibly clear here. These cognitive shifts are not magic. This framework will not pay your taxes, and it won't retroactively give you 8 hours of sleep.
Unfortunately.
Right. But it definitively stabilizes your biological and psychological baseline. Because whatever you feed your highly impressionable brain first, urgency or intention, tends to stick. Small systemic shifts in those first few minutes have a disproportionately massive impact on your executive function for the rest of the day.
It is entirely about creating a sturdy foundation you can actually stand on, even when the edges of your life are crumbling a bit. Now, before we wrap up today's episode, it's important we provide a quick reality check and disclaimer regarding the research we've discussed. The psychological frameworks and biological mechanisms we are exploring are meant to provide general wellness and productivity guidance. They are designed to help you manage everyday, run-of-the-mill stress and build better habits.
Exactly. This is an exploration of behavioral science, not medical advice.
Right. If you are dealing with severe, ongoing anxiety, chronic sleep disorders, or deep systemic burnout, please know that it is entirely normal to need more than just a modified morning routine. We strongly encourage you to talk to a qualified medical professional or therapist.
So important.
Protecting your long-term mental health by seeking professional support is, honestly, the ultimate form of deciding rather than reacting.
Very well said.
So let's bring all this research together. If you take away just one central insight from our exploration today, let it be this. You do not need a perfect morning. You don't need a cinematic, heavily edited routine that only works on your best days. What you actually need is a repeatable entry point.
A simple, neurobiologically sound sequence of anchors that you can return to when everything goes wrong. Because real calm isn't built in ideal conditions, it isn't built on a quiet retreat in the mountains.
No, it really isn't.
Real, resilient calm is built in the middle of real life. It's built when you are tired, when the demands are high, and when the inbox is overflowing.
It's built by respecting your brain's waking state, stepping into the airlock, physically signaling safety, closing open loops, and packing a much lighter suitcase. That is how you stop reacting and start deciding.
Exactly.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and we genuinely hope these insights give you a new perspective on how you start your day. But before you go, if this episode helped you rethink your mornings, please follow the podcast and share it with someone in your life who, maybe needs a less overwhelming start to their day.
We'd love to see you in the next one.
And we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you set your alarm tonight. We spent a lot of time talking about how fiercely our brains crave that immediate digital input the second we wake up, and how hard it is to resist. So ask yourself, what are you secretly so afraid will happen if you force the world to wait just 3 minutes for you tomorrow morning?